Yeah. The fastest growth periods are often the most miserable. If you want progress, get used to pain. The worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. The hardest you've ever worked is the hardest you've ever worked. Every new challenge shows you a new territory you were scared of but survived. Every time you break a new limit, you now know you have the capacity to handle more than you ever did before. It's inverse PTSD, like workload exposure therapy, that teaches you, oh, I've been here before and I didn't die. This is okay.
So one of my training partners, what he likes me to tell him when he's in a hard set is, you're fine. That's what he likes me to tell him.
Mm-hmm.
So he's right at those money sets where you're like, I'm dying right now. And you're like, you're fine. Not keep going, you got this. And a lot of people like that. But he's like, you're fine. You're fine. And I think that that's probably what he tells himself when he's going through those harder times, because so when I was back in the fraternity days, I was in the SEC, which is, the South, and they were notorious for like heavy hazing. And so I was going to join as a pledge. And so I called my dad up and I was like, hey, I don't know what's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And he said this to me, which actually was one of the strongest things that was my frame going into it because of what he said. He said, there is nothing that they can do to you that you have not already had worse happen. And it was this great, they can't do anything worse than what I've already had happen. And so going into all of these, it was this very comical, oh my God. I was like, this is so much not as bad as this other stuff that I've had to go through. And I think that to your point of you have only worked as hard as you've ever worked, the frame of I can stand it because I am not dead. I am living proof every day that I have withstood everything that I have been through, which I think almost all of us could probably give ourselves a little bit more credit. And the day that you can't stand it anymore, you won't have to.
What would you have said if they could have done something worse to you than what had already happened to you?
Am I dead? Guess what? I have a new bar that I know that I can't stand.
Yeah,
more evidence.
That's the new territory that you go through. It's that sort of safety thing, I think, of you're okay. This is fine.
Yeah, you're fine.
Yep. It's a lovely bit of reassurance. And I wonder whether a lot of that comes down to control. Just this sense that even if this is a new territory, your capacity to cope with it still exists. And that in that there is a kind of control that you have. Or maybe it's not a direct control, but it's certainly not a sense of lack of control, right? Or not a sense of lack of outcome.
I'm trying to unpack what you said.
When you reassure somebody that they're fine,
mm-hmm.
what it tells them is, even if this is something which is novel or outside the bounds of your current model,
mm-hmm.
it's something that you can handle.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where we're trying to get to.
You have evidence that you have. So this would be, we will generalize your history to this novel situation, and it also applies.
Yes.
You've been through breakups before. You'll get through this one.
Mm-hmm. Even if this one's worse.
Mm-hmm.
Even if this one's worse. And maybe it's got nothing to do with the breakup. Maybe it's to do with the way that you handled that change in career.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not even to do with any one thing. Maybe it's the fact that you've handled all of your life put together up to right now is 50% of the suffering that you're going to get, and the other 50% is going to come from this one thing. Or maybe it's this is 99% of the suffering is coming from this one thing, but in the 1% that you've had so far, that is the only evidence that you've got, I reckon that you still got this. There's this idea, I might have told you this before, but a friend of mine told me about a time that he went through a really rough period, sort of public scrutiny and lots of bad things happening to him. And he said, all my life I was scared that I was a coward.
Mm.
I was terrified
mm-hmm.
that I was a coward, that I didn't have bravery. And I'd think of myself as a hard man. I hang around with hard men. I do hard men things. And I'd tested myself, but I'd only ever really tested myself under my own volition and mm-hmm. in my own control.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, I thought, the world's going to test me in a manner that I didn't get to choose, and it's going to test me at a velocity that I wasn't prepared for. He used this sentence I fucking adore. He said, I could always hear my better self clearing his throat in the room next door. I could always hear my better self clearing his throat in the room next door. And then his world came crashing down. It's like, and I wondered whether or not that guy next door was going to stop fucking coughing and kick the door in. And sure enough, he did. And it's this lovely explanation of the difference between chosen and unchosen suffering.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the criticisms I had that everybody made around CrossFit.
Mm-hmm.
That, training so hard, the Ryan Fisher, world of this. Dude, you made yourself fucking pass out from a heat stroke in a competition. But even though that is unbelievably extreme and really, really impressive, let's make no bones about it. You chose to be there. You chose to do that pursuit. What if I said, you need to lie on the couch for 3 weeks and not train? How hard would that be? Because that's the difference between chosen and unchosen suffering. And the weird thing is that you can't choose unchosen suffering. It's very difficult. Unless you throw yourself into kind of chaos, flicking yourself, fucking throwing yourself off a cliff is I don't know how this is going to go. So yeah, the clearing his throat in the room next door is just a fucking wonderful visual.
I have 2 thoughts on this. So number 1 is that one of the strongest reframes for suffering is that it gives you the opportunity to create evidence of the person who you want to be. And so it's I cannot say that I'm the type of man who can withstand hard things without having gone through hard things. And so this hard thing that has occurred that was not of my choice can still be something that serves me and my ultimate goal to become the type of man who can do these things. And so reframing suffering as opportunity to create more proof, I think, is really, really strong. Because we are ultimately just the behaviors that we do. But we also ascribe our narratives to why we do those things, which may or may not be true. But we do ascribe those narratives. And so being able to say, this is going to be an amazing story was one of the things that got me through the earlier parts of the gym days when there wasn't any evidence. And I could say, hey, this was many years of my life. Because if it had happened overnight, how unrelatable would that story be? And the reason that we don't tell stories of the prince who just goes up to the girl and she says yes and they lived happily ever after is a very terrible story. And so I think at the end of our lives, we would much rather have the twists and the turns and the depths of character and then the triumph and this is a story that's far more interesting than this.
Dude, I had Jeffrey Katzenberg on the show the other day. Do you know who that is? Guy that founded DreamWorks with Steven Spielberg.
Oh, cool.
The dude that did Lion King.
Oh, amazing.
And every big fucking Disney movie. He was a legend. And I asked him, what did you learn about storytelling? He says, story is only as good as its villains.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Joker in Dark Knight, it's just he made the movie.
And another way to put that would be the story is only as good as its stakes.
Yeah. The bigger the monster, the more epic the hero.
Yes. Yeah.